Chapter 15, the Sobriety Phase, the Holy Grail. Imagination is the only weapon in the war against reality. Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. The final and ever-evolving, lifelong process of sobriety. Sobriety is not a destination. It is simultaneously a journey and a destination. It is a living, breathing, growing process, and done correctly, it never stops. We do arrive there, yet we continue to journey along its borders and interiors, thoroughly searching and sightseeing all of its aspects, landscapes, and terrains. To have sobriety, you must have many qualities that are not easily won and are difficult to sustain, especially in a toxic modern world. To be sober is to know yourself. You must know your strengths, but more importantly, you better know your weaknesses and not be ashamed of them. If you underestimate the power of your weaknesses, you've underestimated your strengths. Some weaknesses, cues, are obvious. Hanging out with those who use, reading, web browsing, or otherwise associating with using topics, dwelling or ruminating on using, dishonesty, omission of truth, and non-transparency in your life and relationships, laziness and apathy, avoidance of responsibilities. Weaknesses can be situational, and some are unique to you alone. Situational means specific and temporary circumstances of stress, such as a flat tire or bad traffic. Unique to you means collection of circumstances that get to you in particular, such as work or family issues. How do you handle relationship stress, work stress? I personally thrive on stress, and it helps me stay clean, but you might not feel the same. For many people, stress and intense feelings of responsibility can be toxic and depleting. Everyone's different. Some people prefer the mountains and others prefer the beach. Some thrive on the stress of life and some atrophy from it. Neither is right or wrong. It's only bad to be mindless and contradictory of your true self-nature. I fall apart and am at high risk of using when life is slow and low stress, whereas you might feel peaceful and happy when life is slower and paced. I can wish to be the type who graciously experiences the slower paced life, or I can take ownership and responsibility of my own true nature. Knowing your strengths is essential too. Some of mine are as follows: my spirituality, my family life and commitments, my ambitions, staying active and busy, health, being intellectually challenged, making plans for the future to look forward to, my addictive nature turned into discipline. They look good on paper, right? However, for example, making plans for the future can be a very stressful way of being. In order for me to feel stable and secure, I need to know when things start, where they are, when they end. Details give me a sense of control and security. There are liabilities with this mindset. Why can't I feel stable and comfortable accepting things that simply happen the way they happen and when they happen? Could I be happier and more at peace if I wasn't so uptight about details? Isn't it possible I miss out on the more natural or organic way things are? The simple, spontaneous, and less controlled? Sure, those are virtuous qualities. They're just not my qualities. I could argue that the more chill, laid-back personalities miss out on many fun and interesting things by not getting involved enough and planning and organizing their events and daily living. But does that make me right? No. They could argue that being much more laid back is better. Are they right? No. There is no right or wrong, just authenticity to our natures. We need to truly know our natures and be true to them, not our superficial natures. Like I want drugs to feel good, but our innate natures. I am structured, organized, controlling, serious, or I am easygoing, spontaneous, disorganized, funny, non-serious. And it truly helps to know why too. Why are you non-serious? Maybe the answer is because being serious is a drag. It prevents me from experiencing life more naturally and more humorously. Good answer. Why am I serious? Because being serious helps me to experience life more completely and thoroughly. A frivolous life is meaningless to me and therefore unfulfilling. To each their own. Neither is right or wrong. It is a matter of personal resonance. One mentality resonates with you and the other does not. Once you take the needed time to sincerely get to know who and why you are certain ways, you can put it aside and just live it. However, If you do not take the time to get to know why you are this way or that way, you are not living consciously and therefore are vulnerable to your whims and desires. I think you know where that leads. Take some time during your recovery and throughout your sobriety to think on the whys. For some of you, this is natural, but for the less introspective, it is a chore, to say the least. Commit to your introspection with seriousness, but once it's done, leave it and move on. Each time we change or grow, we need to do the chore of contemplating, evaluating, and understanding it before we just accept it and move on. The more you know about yourself, the more resilient you are to relapse. What's your favorite color? Food, pet or animal, sport or hobby, music or movie? If you had all the time and money you could use, how would you spend your time and money? What do you live for? What do you want people to know about you? What do you hope they never know about you that you know all too well? What do you wish for? What do you fear? What kind of person do you respect? How close are you to being that kind of person? What do you believe happens to you when you die? How does this belief affect the way you choose to live? Do you believe in God? Why or why not? What do you think of the universe? Is there a purpose for you? Do all humans have the same purpose, or does everyone have a separate purpose? Why do good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people? Answer these questions, and if you say, I don't know, to any of them, stop, wonder, think and contemplate until you know the answers. Does a question you just answered cause you to think of another's question? If so, answer it. And don't stop until you've answered all the I don't knows in your life. When you know what your life means and you make a personal connection to its meaning, you will be able to stay clean because you will know each and every day that what you're fighting for is about you, yourself, your beliefs. Write complete answers to all the listed questions I've just given you, and in 3 days, review them and see if they're accurate. Alter the answers as needed. Repeat this exercise in 3 months. Compare the newer answers to the first set and think over the differences. If you don't know something about yourself, how you feel or think, say, hold on, let me think about that, and get the answer. That unknown thing may be critical, since nothing about yourself is insignificant. Having trouble getting the answer? Read, study, talk to a priest or spiritual teacher, sponsor or counselor. Search for answers, but don't settle on any single answer until you feel it resonates deep within. Truth is simple. You know it when you see it. As you search for truth in life, even if you don't find absolutes, you will learn more about yourself and develop the ability to think and problem solve. Don't be afraid to get philosophical or even spiritual. Get deep and turn over everything until you find what you're looking for. Sobriety is an ongoing search for truth and a constant process of self-improvement. Therefore, know your weaknesses, know your strengths, know thyself. As long as our reasons for being clean are abstract and impersonal to us, our commitment will also remain abstract and impersonal. If commitment lacks intimate and personal drive, it will fail. Ask yourself, why are you staying sober? Is it because life sucks on dope? That's a good reason. Is it because life could be better off dope? That's also a good reason. Is it because no healthy, good, quality person will ever marry you if you're on dope? That's a great reason. Want to be rich, famous, peaceful, healthy, run a marathon, go to the moon, start a business, raise kids, see the world? These are all good reasons. The only qualification your reason for being sober needs is that it needs to be deeply personal and meaningful to you. Saying that life will be better is too generic. Define better. Don't be afraid to qualify better and put expectations to it. Your reasons need to be personal and powerful. Why does a dope fiend wait for hours in the rain and cold to score? How does he find the strength and commitment to endure such misery of the scoring process? It's because he has a powerful commitment and knows why he's doing it. It's not abstract, and your reasons for wanting sobriety should not be abstract either. Do you want sobriety for you, or is it because your mom wants you to be sober? Is it because society says getting loaded is wrong? These reasons are not personal enough. These are remote and ambiguous. Refine them. My mom needs me sober and I love, respect, admire, and trust her. Suddenly, because my mom wants me to, is personal. You must know and feel the reasons. Ask yourself why you want, no need to be sober. Don't stop answering it until you come up with the most important reason, the thing that you want so badly it makes you weep, but you'll never attain without being sober. Why do you need to be sober? Follow that question to the end of your soul. Being sober does not guarantee you will attain that thing, but being loaded is a guarantee you never will. My reason? I've often heard it said that you can only get clean for you, that so long as you're doing it for others, it's not real and won't work. First of all, I don't care why you get clean. I just pray you try and succeed. No matter why you do it, your life will be better and you'll be free. As time goes on, you will develop clarity and the ability to respect and care for yourself, and the reason for sobriety will shift from where it was to yourself. There is a common perception that drug addicts lack the ability to truly care about themselves. This is often true in many ways. Quite a paradox. Addicts don't truly care for themselves, yet they're told that they must get clean for themselves and no one else. I did not do dope because I loathed myself. I did dope because I liked it and also had some unknown sense that I was not worth or deserving of anything else. But I was unconscious of that. My problem was not that I hated myself or wanted to fail. If anything, I was more of an existentialist. This sense of existentialism justified my drug life because I wasn't doing anything, man. I was just an energy blip in the universe. Groovy, man. I can look back now and see that I was indeed sabotaging myself to avoid failing at things legitimately. As long as I continued to fail in life because of being on dope, it really wasn't my fault, was it? I mean, it was the dope and the drugs, maybe, and being cursed as a drug addict, but that wasn't my fault. 70% of the addicts I meet in a materially comfortable community fall into this category. And when I confront them with this, they get remarkably better and make progress. I wasn't a victim. I was being a coward by not being accountable for legitimately failing if I was going to fail. Then for who? What did I get clean and sober for? Well, hell, it was for love. A decent girl who was smart and pretty would never have love a guy like me. I wanted to be in love and have somebody of quality who would love me, and no one of quality would love and have a relationship with me as a dope fiend. No decent, smart, self-respecting girl would ever accept me the way I was. So if I ever hoped to upgrade in the girlfriend department, I'd better get it together. How could I ever love a girl who would have me the way that I was? Pretty high snobby standard, I know, but it was the tool I needed to get clean. Even larger than that was my newborn son. I wanted to deserve his love, affection, and respect by the time he grew up. The real reason, to be free. I don't want to be owned and operated by anything but God's will and destiny. Drugs controlled me. They dictated how I lived every day. I had no choices available to me until I satisfied the need for drugs, and even then my choices were limited because of being under the influence and eventually needing more drugs. It was like needing a passport document, dope, to go anywhere at all, and being denied it again and again. Want to borrow my reason? Go for it, but make it your own by meditating on it until you can't live without it, until the need for it makes you weep. We are all addicted to the need to be freer. Addiction binds us and restricts us. We are imprisoned. Want to be sober for your kids? Don't just think it or say it. Obsess on that idea. Why is that important to you? Because it's the right thing to do? Why is it the right thing to do? Because they deserve it? Why do they deserve it? Is it because they're innocent? Why does that matter? Why should you be sober for your kids, or sober for your husband or God or anyone or anything? This is going down the rabbit hole, asking why, until you finally arrive at an actual conclusion. The blame game. In the AP, abstinence phase, you were advised to postpone reconciling or resolving past pains you may have caused. In the RP, recovery phase, we got into making amends. Now, in sobriety, we can come full circle. Don't blame yourself for your past transgressions. You were overwhelmed by a compulsion. If you had been sober, you would never have done many of the things you did. It is not your fault. You have been afflicted with this disorder. Don't blame anyone else. It's no one else's fault either. Sure, life circumstances contribute to your addictions. Bad parents, good parents, spoiled, not spoiled, some tragic event, a boring suburban life with social hypocrisy, or a complicated, impoverished life, all real factors in how and why we became addicts. Understand them, label them, can them, and shelve them. Once you understand the roles everything played, including your own choices, move on from them. They're no longer relevant. The past has little function on the necessary actions of the present. Acknowledge where you've been, but focus on where you're going. Now that you're beginning to be sober, you're ready to tackle the bigger issues. Making amends to those you've harmed is a crucial part of your recovery. It deepens your humility and sets precedents for a life of accountability. In the 12 steps, they instruct you to review your life and take inventory of your past. Make a list of those you harmed and how you harmed them. Once the list is done, you must become willing to make amends for those transgressions. Real emphasis needs to be put on this point. Your willingness to make amends needs to come from a sincere, contemplative experience of analyzing those transgressions. Why was it wrong? How did it cause pain? What type of pain? When you consider how you hurt someone, you must try to consider it from his or her point of view, not your own. For example, Marla complained about the mess her husband left all over the house. How would you like it if I left a mess everywhere and you had to clean it up? Eddie, the husband, replied, well, I wouldn't mind. It's not a big deal. Those messes don't bother me. Go ahead. I think we'd both be happier. Eddie invalidated Marla's feelings and her right to have her own preferences and opinions. Eddie needed to consider it from the perspective of someone who likes cleanliness and requires order, not from his own perspective, but from hers. Marla also needed to consider the issue from Eddie's perspective if she was ever going to avoid taking the irritation personally. What may be painful to you might not be painful to someone else, and vice versa. When you consider how your actions hurt people, you must go beyond the concept of how you would feel if people did it to you and consider how they feel, their personality types, their past and emotions, their childhoods, all the things that make them who they are, that set them in a position to be hurt by these things. Eddie was not making a mess throughout the house to cause Marla unhappiness. He did it out of early life conditioning. It was habit. His mother always picked up after him, making him oblivious to messes. It was natural for Marla to take it personally. It just wasn't accurate or productive. His messiness was not driven by a sinister agenda. Until you have reached a consciousness of empathy, you might not be ready to make amends. Here's how you can gauge if you're ready to make amends to someone. Once you feel the need to apologize so badly you can hardly take another breath, you're ready. When you feel such shame and regret that you can't take another step in life without setting it right, you're ready. When you do not need forgiveness, but instead are consumed with the need to offer some sense of peace to the person you offended, you're ready. If you do it without true sincerity, you could make it worse for both of you. So take your time. First, you need to consider if it could cause more harm. Don't go knocking on some woman's door to apologize for having an affair with her husband. Consider all the possible ways that your making amends could make things worse. Sometimes people might send you away saying, I don't ever want to talk to or hear from you ever again. You should respect that. Sometimes saying you're sorry in your heart is the only opportunity you'll get. Sometimes reopening old wounds is more than someone can hear. Make sure your apology is not for your relief, but for his or hers. Begin by approaching the person, asking if he or she can spare some time to meet with you. In person is better than by phone or text. State why you came and what is on your mind in simple terms. A sentence or two keeps it economical. Don't rationalize or defend your actions. Your apology should stand independently. Don't dilute it by pointing out you were on drugs when it happened, and don't bring up things the person did that hurt you or led to your actions. No buts. A but makes it seem like you're excusing or justifying your actions. Your apology should not be contingent on anything. Offer it for free and with no expectations. Don't ask for forgiveness. Don't even bring it up. Tell him or her you are sorry. That's it. No strings. Allow them to react. Are they angry? Let her be angry. Is he sad? Let him be sad. Is she forgiving? Allow that too. Is he unforgiving? That's his prerogative. If your apology is truly sincere, it is not contingent or conditional on him or her accepting or even having a graceful response. If you are truly sorry and really feel that what you did was wrong, your apology should be combined with your forgiveness for whatever reaction he or she has. A true apology is not conditional. It stands alone. Oh, and make sure you pay for that coffee or lunch. Most transgressions are complex. They're not single events like a theft or a lie. Therefore, the amends process must also be complex, requiring more than a simple apology. Listening and interacting with those people closest to you who have been hurt by your actions is part of the amends process. Usually, the people closest to you were hurt over and over and need time to vent their anger, their pain, and sometimes even punish you or have you compensate them in some way, usually emotionally, before feeling things are right again. This may seem and is passive aggressive. However, part of your sobriety is to learn to cope with what seem like extraordinary and unfair circumstances and situations. If you're not being forgiven or trusted, even when you've shown good, even long-term progress, consider it a test of your commitment to sobriety. You must remember that non-addicts can never truly understand what your compulsion is. Some can grasp what has been taught here about it being a disorder and compulsion, while others cannot. I once spoke to a father at length about his son's alcoholism. I taught him everything he needed to know to not judge the disorder, removing his ignorance about alcoholism. He understood and said he was so glad he came to see me and was now educated on how this thing works. My son's alcoholism is a problem and an illness. He's not intentionally hurtful. But the next sentence out of his mouth was, all I know is next time he takes a drink, I'm going to belt him in the mouth. That's all it takes, a good butt kicking. Then he'll learn. All I could do was shake my head. Some people are simply not capable of accepting addiction as anything other than a choice and think that if you sincerely tried, you could beat it. Sobriety requires tolerance of addiction ignorance and endlessly trying to convince or educate non-addicts how wrong they are about it. This son worked on accepting his father's ignorance, not demanding forgiveness or battling for it. Making amends is one of the most liberating experiences you can have. It's not just for addicts either. Everyone should become expert in saying they're sorry and deeply reflecting on their transgressions to others. Don't be afraid to feel their pain and make it your own. Making amends can be very uncomfortable, but afterward, you will be richer for it. Empathy is magical. You can actually beg and plead and pray to take on someone else's pain. Like a mystical experience, something supernatural causes the pain to shift and transfer, at least partially, from them to you. Then you release it. Now that is taking accountability. Don't be in a hurry to make amends. It could take years to sort through and get to it all sincerely. I did not complete making my amends for over 5 years, and in that time, I made new transgressions that I needed to make amends for. My inventory was always evolving as I slowly remembered things I had forgotten due to drugs. Done right, it never ends. Make making amends a part of your life for the rest of your life. It's the civilized and evolved way to be. Many people believe we can be victims of circumstances. There's no such thing. In 2013, I was hit by a truck and nearly killed. I was driving safely when it happened. Another driver ran a red light and made an illegal U-turn. Clearly, I was not accountable for this tragedy, and the police report says so. I had to learn how to walk and talk from scratch, a slow recovery I am still involved in for the rest of my life. The shortest route of peace through this was to accept that while I was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, it was still my own actions that put me right there at that specific moment in time. It is my choice to get up and get out of bed and breathe and go to work and drive a car or bike. No one puts a gun to my head. Therefore, I am accountable for my presence in that intersection at that time. It is not mature or peaceful to dwell on the selfish error of the other driver. It is what it is, and I somehow chose to be there, even if it was by coincidence or accident. Being focused on the other driver's error is useless to my recovery from it. Blaming myself for being at that place at that time is also useless in my recovery from this tragic injury. I've tried, not always successfully, to focus on what is now and coming soon, not what was or why it happened. I already knew how to blame people, but I had to get busy learning how to walk since I didn't know how anymore. I couldn't waste time on hating, no matter how justified it seemed. A more accessible insight is one of economics. The U.S. economy fell apart in 2008, and it was tempting to feel victimized by financial industry greed and incompetence and by those who signed for loans that any knucklehead should have known was beyond their means. I paid my mortgage. I had taken a loan that was sensible and chose a house I could afford over one that I dreamed of owning. So why was I losing out? High unemployment became a symptom of this issue, which affected my business as many people had no money to pay for my services. I followed the rules and made reasonable, practical decisions, so why me? How was I accountable for this? I'm certainly affected by these poor economy issues, yet I didn't contribute to them, so why me, damn it? Aren't I a victim? No, it was my decision to live, work, and function in society. I'm not naive in the ways of the world and have awareness that many people are driven by greed and exclusively material values. My willingness to live and work in society was also my willingness to gamble on their decisions and how those decisions could affect the economy. I make a living through society. I vacation in its hotels, I drive the cars it makes, and I try to enjoy many of the things that society offers. I take accountability this way. I am still frustrated at the greed-driven society we live in, but in many ways, I am not only a willing citizen of it, but even a contributor. Anything less would be a lie. So whose fault is it that my house value went down? Mine first, them second. I didn't tank the housing market, yet I did decide to be in a position of risk. I suppose I could have gone and lived in a cave, but I chose to live in a home in a suburban town. Nobody put a gun to my head to force me to be a part of society. Therefore, I cannot explicitly choose which elements will affect me. I chose to buy and own a house, and I chose to ride a bike down that fateful street that day. I'm accountable. I'm not a victim. You're not a victim of a bad poker hand. You willingly anteed up and took the risk to gamble. Accountability is applicable to every area of your life. Instead of blaming the thing you're angry at, stop. Ask yourself how you got yourself in the position to begin with. Do not allow yourself to be a victim of circumstance. That's a far too convenient theory. Got mugged going down the street? Yes, you were definitely victimized, and that mugger should be caught and punished. I'm not suggesting you blame yourself for being mugged, but it was your choice to live in a dangerous city or take an innocent walk through a central park at that specific time. Don't blame yourself, but do take it as a fact of life. Things happen, plain and simple. Life is too short to blame others and too long to dwell on blaming yourself. Take accountability, acknowledge negative experiences as a part of life, and move on and try to be smarter in the future. You shouldn't give up your walks in the park, but maybe you should carry some pepper spray or go with a friend. Strike the idea of victim of circumstance from your thoughts completely. There's no such thing. You have at least some marginal role in all of your circumstances, even if it was only a decision to be what soon became the wrong place at the wrong time. Spiritualists do not accept that anything can happen without a reason, as God is involved in everything. Atheists think that maybe there's no grand design or reason for tragedy, but it is a feature of the world. The sun comes up and the sun goes down, that's nature. I know I screwed up, I admit it, and I take full responsibility for that. That's it. As if saying I take responsibility for it is actually the same as actually taking responsibility. If your boss tells you to do something and you say, I will take responsibility for that, but don't do it, you haven't taken responsibility, and you could lose your job. People often say this, yet don't take any action. Taking responsibility is about taking action. If you did something wrong, you cannot just admit you did it. You gotta fix it. I mentioned in the section on making amends that you might need to compensate someone for your transgressions. First, you take accountability. Deeply contemplate your mistakes. Next, you apologize, trying to make amends. And last, you take responsibility through action. When you take accountability for something or come to the conclusion that you've done harm to someone, the next thing to do is to ask what, if anything, you can do to fix, repair, or at least minimize the damage. Can you take it back, reverse time, pay back the debt? Sometimes you can't. What's done is done and there's nothing you can do to erase it. But usually you can do something if you truly want to. Smash your friend's car when you were drunk 3 years ago? Offer to help them with a house project. Or if it's still an issue, repair the car or offer to pay for some of the damage. If they refuse, that's fine. And you should not insist to the point where you make them uncomfortable. But you should have a strong desire to and even find joy in making an effort to right the wrong. If you can't think of any way to fix it, you can ask, "Hey, I appreciate your time and acceptance of my apology. It means a lot to me. I hope you allow me to do something to make up for it. I know you probably don't think it's necessary, but I would take great joy in doing something nice for you for what you've done for me." It's what friends do. They reciprocate. Admitting responsibility is meaningless unless you are truly willing to compensate for your error. Enhancing and evolving your accountability will not only help you stay clean, but will enhance your character. Better get to it. Aftercare refers to the recovery involvement you have when you have real traction and are beginning to live that sober life as it has been defined. Maybe this means a meeting a week or maybe only once a month. Your involvement in formal recovery, meetings and counseling, etc. should be slowly phased out in stages. If you used to participate in 2 meetings per week and 1 counseling session, then shifting to 1 meeting per week and counseling every other week may be a safe option. Do this for 3 months more and then consider 1 meeting every other week and a counseling session every 3 weeks. Whatever combination of programs and strategies helped you get there, keep in touch with them so they are familiar. Keep in contact enough so they serve as a gentle reminder of where you've been and how you got where you are now. Also, if you should ever need to find your way back to them, they will not be foreign or lost to you. I have clients who keep in touch and visit only every few months. I drop them a text or a call every once in a while too. Without pressure, just to remind them I'm here and to take advantage of having a counselor if they need one. If clients are permanent fixtures in my practice, then we're failing. It may be good for business, but if we do our work, everyone moves on. Once you've completed the abstinence and recovery phases and have begun sobriety, you may not require the same intensity in your recovery commitments, but you still need to stay involved. After a year of being clean and working your program, you might not need or even have the time to go to many meetings or be involved regularly in a program. If your sobriety is going well, this may be the case. Your recovery involvement should slowly be displaced, but not replaced, by other productive involvements. Your kids, career, social life, playing a community sport, helping in local theater, or other hobbies or interests. These new interests should take up your time, making intense involvement in recovery programs nearly impossible. However, I chose the word displace over replace for a reason. You never want to replace recovery because the only alternative to recovery is using. But when your life gets healthy and busy, those new interests and responsibilities will displace recovery programs and they will become your program. I don't need to go to meetings to stay clean if my interest in my career and family is paramount to me. Just as meetings or sessions can give you safe haven and refuge from using temptations, so can work, family, and other healthy interests. These new lifestyle changes become our program. Life becomes our sobriety program. Mike lived full-time at a recovery house, 100 miles from me. He'd been sober for 6 months, was doing well, and was intensely committed. In addition to seeing me, he went to 5 to 7 meetings per week. I asked him, "Where do you see your recovery process 5 years from now?" He said, "Probably going to meetings at least 5 times a week. I don't ever want to stop or slow down." While I respect the caution and dedication he had to recovery, if it's going to consume our lives, maybe we're not as free from addiction as we'd hope to be. An obsession with recovery is fundamentally better than an obsession with drugs. However, we need to manage everything that is disproportionately dominating to us. Drugs, food, sports, people, even recovery meetings. If we can't stay clean without permanent immersion into sobriety strategies, we should immerse into them. But everything in excess is toxic in some way or another. Anything in excess displaces other things. I personally hoped that someday I would no longer need to go to meetings, counseling, or remain in isolation to sustain my sobriety. I wanted to be free and live as normally as anyone else. That's the whole reason I was trying to quit drugs in the first place. I wanted to have access to the normal life. I was willing to accept that recovery programs and processes were better than using, and if necessary, I would go to meetings and take counseling every day and any day over being loaded. But I certainly strive to be free from it all as much as possible. It is dangerous if we oversaturate ourselves in recovery. We can over-identify with ourselves as an addict, and we need to learn how to see ourselves in a different light. I have seen many people stay stuck in addictive patterns largely due to the constant reminder that their recovery is so fragile that if they dare skip a meeting, they will surely relapse. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. We believe it and thereby make it so. While some people do require a constant connection to recovery groups and processes, most don't, and it can cause some folks more harm than good. We should never forget that we are addicts, but having it thrust in our faces all the time is not always a good thing. Try to make your recovery about moving on and beyond. Once you have serious traction and true sobriety, make the choice that best suits you. Maybe that means going to a meeting once a month or only once a year. Many of my clients who came because of drugs continue to see me for everyday life issues for a long time after sobriety, and we rarely talk about drugs anymore. Drug topics can be not only a reminder, but even a cue if discussed over and over again. Talk about it when it's relevant, like any other issue. Obviously, this advice is for sober people only, not those in AP or RP, which require intense and constant focus. However, even in those phases, we all need a day off and a break from being an addict. It's exhausting living an addict life, but it is also sometimes exhausting living a recovery life. Don't be afraid to get some distance from the whole recovery thing. Allow yourself to exist separate from the addict persona. We've learned a lot about how the addictive mind will fool us into thinking things are true when they're not. So how can addicts tell that it's okay to get a little distance from recovery process and that they're not being tricked by their addict minds to let their guards down? It's pretty simple, actually. In time of stress and when we recognize the impulse to use, we should always intensify our recovery. When things are good, we can risk backing off some. Allow others around you, like your counselor, spouse, or sponsor, to help you determine if you should step up your recovery involvement. That tricky, pesky subconscious is programmed to fulfill whatever perception it has of itself. If your subconscious perceives you as an angry, impatient person, it will manifest those behaviors, even encourage your involvement in circumstances that will ensure them. If your subconscious perceives you as a drug-using addict, it will subtly encourage situations and mindsets toward drug-using behaviors and circumstances. The over-identifying mentality is common. Many get so comfortable with the addict persona that they actually seem proud of it, as if it makes them exceptional, special, and interesting. Yes, it is an interesting and curious quality, especially to non-addicts, but it should always remain a private feature of who we are. Not secretive, just discreet or private. If we are exploiting or somehow benefiting from the addict label, then we're not being humble with it. Sorry, but there should be some outward sense of shame and discretion for this pathology. It should not be exploited or advertised any more than OCD or bipolarity is. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but it is a private affair. Only our close associates, friends, and family members should be in the fold of knowing those details about us. On your way. You now have a workable set of practices, strategies, and attitudes for the long-term sustenance of real sobriety. These are the same practices, strategies, and attitudes that any mature, responsible, true adult has and lives by. These qualities are not only for sobriety, they are for building and having good character. Someone with good character respects the gifts of health, thinking, and feeling. He or she honors them, cherishes them, and exercises them to keep them fit and healthy. This section's instructions should be reviewed, repeated, and ongoing. Make sobriety your new addiction. Become obsessed with clean and honorable living, with balance, thoughtfulness, awareness, accountability, honesty, and dignity. You can live your life in a fulfilled state, and if you are fulfilled, what do you need drugs for?